Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for coming today. Appreciate you making the time today, lunchtime, this morning, and this evening. Hope everyone is staying as well and safe as you can be. I know it's really tough, and especially some parts of the world today. And thank you, Abhijit, and the whole GMAT Club team for having us here again. So I'm sure you've all heard me talk before, but my name is Scott Edinburgh, founder of Personal MBA Coach. Extremely excited to be joined by our newest team member, Nicole Shay, former Columbia Business School admissions director. And we will also be joined by Ife Han, who you might have heard from another webinar, who we got into Wharton last year. So he'll be coming in about 20 minutes, and he'll chat a little bit about his experiences. So feel free to ask any questions, and whether you're in Facebook or YouTube or wherever, and we'll be answering them, some throughout the talk and then some at the end. And any questions that we don't get to, feel free to just reach out anytime. So we'll tell you a little bit about what we do here at Personal MBA Coach, a few slides about us, sort of the company. Then we'll get into meat of the presentation, kind of behind the admissions director curtain, what's really happening, and what things you can learn from us as you start to prepare your applications for this year or for future years. So we've been helping folks get into schools for many years, since 2008. Top U.S. ranked consultant on some leading websites out there. I was the speaker at the GMAT conference last year and talked about recommendation letter authenticity and various other details with a lot of ADCOM directors. Overall, we have a 96% success rate. It says 6 million in scholarships. We'll probably surpass 7. I think it's one of the highest numbers out there. We had 4 million from round 1 alone from our clients. And we have a team of former M7 MBA interviewers. So we have some admissions directors, as we'll talk about in a minute. And then we also have editing team, which have masters or PhDs from top Ivy League schools. So these are some of our team members here. So myself, I went to MIT for undergrad, Wharton for my MBA, and been running Personal MBA Coach since we got started. I'm on the board for AGAC, the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants, and we do a lot of different things with admissions directors. A plug for the AGAC conference, it's next week, and we'll have an applicant fair on Thursday. So definitely tune in there in case you haven't already registered. But we'll do different things with admissions directors. We'll analyze profiles kind of behind the scenes, fake people, determine who's getting accepted and rejected. I usually give a talk and talk a lot about this applicant survey that we run. We have MJ Shores, who's a former admissions director from Wharton and UCLA on the team. And then, of course, as you're seeing here today, Nicole, who spent about 6 years at Columbia. And then I also run the company with my sister, Erin, who manages sort of the company that's behind the scenes, training, knowledge management. And she works at Bain and went to Yale for her MBA. And we'll go over more details about us and the company at the end, what we do, how we can help you. We help through all the parts of the process, from story development, essay editing, interview prep, and we'll go over everything, towards the end, so you have a sense of, what separates us and what kind of makes us a little bit special. So we'll talk a little about, what happens behind the MBA admission curtain here. So first, who's on the admissions committee? I'll talk to some of these, and I'll have Nicole jump in to add some thoughts, questions, comments, disagreements throughout the talk. So this varies by school size. Who's on the team. Some schools you'll have recruiting staff, maybe career office staff, outside readers, students might be on the committee, second year students interviewing. Some schools will even have academic program staff, faculties, and deans. So it can get a little bit kind of complicated to some extent. Maybe Nicole, I don't know if you want to talk a little about what the landscape is like at Columbia.
Yeah, I would agree with what you said. It's going to depend on the size of the school. At Columbia, the majority of our committee is made up by our team, our admissions team, because we're recruiting the students. We're the ones meeting them one-on-one. We're really the ones that our leadership wants in the room to evaluate the candidates.
Great.
And, a great point, though, Scott, is that that's probably true for any top school, is that the admissions team is going to be at least a part of the committee. And so you'll want to make sure that you're, trying to touch base and talking to those admissions team members and making good impressions when you do.
Great. And Nicole, as you see comments on the right that you feel like answering or asking me, feel free to kind of chime in. I'll flip back and
Perfect.
forth between the presentation.
Yeah.
So actually, one thing on that, just a question for you. I mean, I know the answer, but a lot of people ask, what does that mean, right? So at least from your experience, what would be good interactions with you? What would be bad? How do we make an interaction? Often clients will say, I'm going to an event, especially now that's virtual. Like, how can I get in touch with? How can I talk to Nicole? How can I get her to like me? How would you kind of answer it?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is always going to start with it's different for each school. Some schools are a little bit more hands off, some are high touch. I would consider Columbia pretty high touch. It's pretty easy to reach out to an admissions committee member. I will say that virtual events is a really great place to start. Typically, we'll share our contact information with you in some way, and then you should follow up with an email. An email can be a simple thank you. Sending an ADCOM member an email that's like kind, thoughtful, and doesn't require a response is always a gift. But if you are going to ask questions, which of course you should, if you do have questions, you should make sure those questions aren't things that can be answered simply by looking at the website, or even especially were covered in the presentation or event that you just attended.
Great. Thank you. So there are four main things that admissions committee members are looking for, and probably more than four. Nicole can add some others. First, we have academic ability, right? So this is kind of obvious. We won't spend a long time on this. Did you do well in school? Do you have a good GMAT score or GRE score? I would just say executive assessment. And there is a correlation, right, between test scores and success in the program. And basically, schools don't want to accept people that don't have the ability to succeed. A question for you, and this is, I'll just let you kind of want to hear, Nicole. So obviously, if the GPA is low and the GMAT or test score is high, that can compensate. And there are a lot of different factors that weigh into this. How can someone think about showing academic ability outside of these these sort of areas? Other, like, how do you think about classes versus test score, things like that?
Well, I think that third bullet point is really important. We aren't looking at your scores in order to kind of preclude you from admission. We're looking for ways to, if we like you, include you in admission. So, we want to just make sure, or, and ADCOMs want to make sure that they're not setting you up for failure. And so there are ways where you can make sure that you're thinking about your resume. They're looking at quantitative abilities, really, truly. And so making sure that you have ways in which you currently or have in your career used quantitative skill sets can be really important. And I think this is a tough question. People will ask, should I go out and do the HBX core? Should I do like these other types of courses to demonstrate that, my quantitative abilities are strong? And in my experience, I always tell people, like, that's a really great place to work on some of these skills. But it's probably in your best interest, if you can, to go back and try the GMAT or try the GRE again after taking those exams. I think that really demonstrates not only your willingness to do extra work to be better quantitatively, but then to go and take the test shows your willingness and your commitment to, joining a strong MBA program.
Right. And one thing to keep in mind on that note is the timing. Obviously it's a little bit more impactful if you have a grade from the course before you hit submit. If you submit that application and you had just enrolled in a Berkeley extension course, probably still good, but we don't really have the data there.
Agreed.
So then relevant work experience, this is sort of obvious, right? You want professional experience that will help, apply to a future career and demonstrate one's abilities or flaws. I won't really talk a lot about this, but work experience varies. We send people to schools, with very little work experience, and obviously the average is around 5 years for most schools. So this can vary, quite a bit. Anything to add, Nicole, or should I move on to the next topic?
The only thing I would add is that I've always seen a lot of anxieties around whether you work for a small company versus a big company, your title. And what I always tell people is that business schools are looking for a diverse student body. And so whether you work for a small company or a big company, they want all representation from all different companies and all different roles. So I wouldn't be discouraged from applying just because you work for a small company that no one's heard of. You probably wore many hats and had a lot of responsibility. So make sure that shows through in your resume.
Absolutely. Thank you. So then focus, right? So this is the forward plan. What are your goals like? How specific are they? Do you have vision for how that candidate will drive impact? And actually, this is something where I'll let you weigh in briefly here as well, because I know that, when we're guiding folks to get into Columbia is a school that tells me, okay, let's be specific. You don't want to use the word "or" in your goal statement. So a question for you, Nicole, maybe we'll do the question and answer. That's kind of fun. So question for you, what happens when you have somebody that looks good on paper, and then the goals are they're just not strong. They're not clear. They have multiple things that they say that they can do. How would that be evaluated, and how do you think that compares, from the school you came from and then across, other schools? As far as candidates, great, but the path just really isn't that focused.
You're going to hear from a lot of ADCOM members that the overall review is holistic and we're looking at a lot of aspects. If you're coming to us with, medium average work experience and you have 2 to 3 goals listed in your essay and they have nothing to do with, or you haven't tied them back to your current experience, it's going to be really hard to admit that person because they haven't demonstrated how they see the school matching up and helping them achieve their goals. That being said, if you're a super strong candidate, you're a utility player, your experience is strong, but maybe not connected, and you've demonstrated strong interest in the specific school, we might just feel like you can do whatever you set your mind to. And so I think it's really tough to say for certain. My advice is to always pick a goal. I've never seen a school that, follows someone around with their essay and says, you're not following the path to this goal. I would say pick a goal, make sure that your essays, your narrative really is around that goal. And at least in my time at Columbia, it was always fine to have a plan B. I wouldn't make an or statement, but maybe a plan B if your goal is a little loftier. That would be my advice.
Great. So we'll go to a couple of questions. I'll answer the first one, and then I'll let you tackle the next one. First one is quick. Is the work experience counted upon matriculation? Yes, it's upon matriculation. So you'd want to add, at this point, about a year and 5 months. That would be your, months of work experience. And then Nicole, I'll let you tackle this one because I know, Columbia deals with GRE differently than some other schools. Maybe you can talk about that.
So it's really going to depend on the school. This is where it's nice to just have an ADCOM member that you can shoot easy emails to. If someone asked me simply about that question about, and let me read the question just in case others aren't looking in the comments. If you have both the GMAT and GRE exam, should you mention both scores or only a single score, whichever is higher? And do you convert the GRE to GMAT when assessing? So a fine question to ask an ADCOM member. At Columbia, it was nice to have that ETS tool to convert GRE to GMAT. We certainly used it, but it's going to pop out a big scary number. And by no means is a committee member going to use that number and say that's exactly what they would have gotten on their GMAT. It's really a range. It helps to kind of get an idea of where you are compared to your peers who are applying. If you have both scores, it's completely up to you if you want to submit both of them. I often felt like I would rather see someone have taken a test 3 or 4 times. And I would think that, my former colleagues would agree, someone should have taken the test 4 times and maybe have done a little better each time. Or, you took the GMAT, you didn't do great, but you really shined on the GRE. I'd like to see that. It demonstrates kind of this grit or this determination. But if you're not comfortable doing that, You don't have to. I don't think that there's anything wrong with not sharing a score that you're not proud of if it makes you uncomfortable. There's no way we would know that, and nor would we care. We're really looking at the highest score.
Right. Okay, so then also strong reason for pursuing an MBA. And this kind of goes along with the goals before. Knowledge of the program details, you know how the MBA is going to help you to fit in, and you talk about your fit for the school. And this also varies based on the school. We have a slide further in the deck. We'll see if we get there. If not, you'll have to tune into our next webinar that compares and talks about how much of that stuff schools care about. But some schools are really interested in fit, and other schools just really aren't. And you could spend the whole essay writing about why Harvard is the best place for you, but that's not really what they're evaluating in their application process. So a little bit about the application review process. What happens, this again varies a little bit by school. Maybe there's a quick review by an ops team. Some schools have this, make sure things are included. If you miss something, don't worry about that. Sometimes we have clients that are worried my study abroad transcript from Barcelona, they didn't send it, and now it's COVID, and what am I going to do? Don't worry about it. If there's something that's missing, you'll be contacted. And in some cases, there's evaluation by perhaps a senior staff member. See if the candidate is qualified. Maybe application will be sent across to all staff and all reviewers. Sometimes there's one review before interview. Sometimes there's multiple reviews before interview. Nicole, if there's anything that you can add that sort of give us a little bit more behind the scenes for what your experience was like. How did your sort of review process compare to what I'm discussing here?
Very similar. We certainly check to make sure that people have all of their materials, but that also is something that happens after being admitted. When at my time at Columbia, all members of the committee read applications, and anyone who wasn't offered a seat was read by at least 3 people on the team. And so it's definitely a very comprehensive review process in my experience. And I think that's all to say that this wasn't like a robotic experience. This was this was a human reading your application. So a lot of people would feel anxious that you wouldn't see their explanation for a few gap months, or if they didn't, articulate this in the right way, it wouldn't be caught or seen. And I think that probably for most schools, it's a very human process. And really a lot of people are getting their eyes on your application before making a final decision.
Yeah,
and
for
then
sure.
we have interviews by invitation only, or we had interviews by invitation only. So, and you would interview with an alum, and that's going to vary by schools, and you should kind of figure that out ahead of time to prepare.
Yeah, definitely. One thing, kind of plug for us, folks like Nicole and others. We have a lot of former interviewers. I think more than most places. So our folks that used to interview at Kellogg and Booth, at Yale and Columbia and Wharton, and the list goes on. And that process really varies a lot. So you want somebody who knows the process for that particular school that you're interviewing with, and also maybe they know you, maybe they don't. So if you're interviewing for some of those schools that I just mentioned, they have folks that only see your resume, and that's it. So you could write everything you want about your life and your Columbia or Booth essays. Your interviewer would not see that. But then sometimes in some schools, an admissions director would see your application. They'd read the whole thing and they would come prepared. 12 questions for you, and those are different questions from what the next question. So it's really important to be able to prepare for the. So interview, right? So how's the interview used? Assess your personality, interpersonal skills, find out what it's going to be like. Sort of obvious, right? It's like a job interview, but then you have to fit in with the class. Don't underestimate the perception that you might give up. And I coach candidates all the time. Sometimes people like what I say, sometimes they don't like what I say, but I'm honest. And if someone's coming across to me in a bad way and you're paying me, how's that going to feel to an admissions director? So as much as it's important to have the right content and the right answers, you want to be a good person for that particular school. And good might mean something different to a different school, but fit isn't important here, because if you look at the numbers, there are many more qualified people per spot. I mean, it could be 4, 5, 6, 7 qualified people for every one person that ends up getting in. So it's not always down to the success. A lot of it is down to the kind of fit. Anything to add there, Nicole?
I would just say, preparation and having that perspective, outside perspective of how you present yourself is really important. So really just being able to articulate your goals, the same goals you put in your application, as well as why the school is a good fit for you is important.
Right. Yeah, still goals, right? They're looking at the goals, as Nicole mentioned. Is the goal feasible? And we talk to a lot of candidates about feasibility of goals. When we kick off a new client, we have this mini 200-word personal MBA coach goals essay that you're doing, separate assignment that we do, and we're making sure that the way that you're writing and drafting your goals is super detailed and it's specific. And so, MJ from our team always says, you don't want me to have to call up my contact in career services to say, do you think Scott can do it? Scott wrote he wants to be a partner at a venture capital firm. Well, that's great, but Scott just left Deloitte, and the odds of that happening after business school, I wouldn't say are extremely high. So, keep in mind that you're not trying to wow anybody with your goals. You want something that makes sense for you, and is kind of feasible. And then, of course, evaluating interest in the program. So does the candidate really know about the program? Are they interested? Right. And again, this is different based on the school. But for some schools that are more high touch, like Nicole mentioned about Columbia, make sure to show your interest. And these folks are very experienced, and so if you're interviewing with someone like we're talking to someone like Nicole, or they'll know if you're trying to be a so definitely take the time to kind of get to know the program. And you're predicting a future performance. This wasn't formative, right? So are you hireable? If you're doing well in an interview, would Google hire you? Would Facebook hire you? That's a lot of what kind of goes into this process. Sometimes there are gaps in an application. Again, this is depending on the school. So if an admissions director reads your whole application and then they ask you things like, let's take Harvard, right? So Harvard Business School reads all the applications before interview, and it will be in an admissions director or staff interviewer that would be conducting an interview, and they're very, very specific. So if there's something that feels like might be a weakness that they want to discuss, they might discuss that. That could be 15 minutes of your interview to talk about one particular thing. So definitely know your application, inside and out. If there are gaps or weaknesses, be ready to talk. So negative interviews. So this is I'll let you weigh in on this as well, Nicole. But obviously, a negative interview is not good, right? A lot of qualified people come. You really want to do well in the interview in order to succeed. So often if you don't do well, it means you don't get in. But are there instances where everything is great, the interview just really isn't quite as strong, and maybe for a school like Columbia where they use alumni for the interview, do people get in that don't have good interview reports? How does that work?
Yeah, this, I think, specific to Columbia and any other schools that use alumni, obviously it's a little bit less standardized in that case. We have fantastic I have to get used to not being at Columbia. We had fantastic leadership who had been there for, decades, who, knew the alum interviewers. And yes, there were times when alums, didn't have the most positive things to say, or were maybe somewhere in the middle, maybe asking questions that we wouldn't have expected. I remember some instances where people are grilling you on sequel or something like that, and they didn't respond the way they expected, or something like that. And I think that those, if everything else is great, those things might be something you can look past. One of the things I think that interviewers are thinking about is really, does this person fit into my community? And so really thinking about that when you're preparing.
Great. Thank you. So I'm gonna pause now and actually go over to to Ife. So Ife, thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate it. Hope you're doing all right. So I'll just let Ife chat a little bit about his experiences with us for a few minutes. The process, and maybe a minute or so about what it was like to to kind of be at Wharton during this whole pandemic. So I'll give you the next kind of 4 or 5 minutes to chat.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Scott, and hi everyone. And Nicole, nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you.
My name is Ife Han, so Wharton class 2022. I met Scott last February, I believe. We met in New York at an MBA tour event. I started my preparation very early, and I already had a GMAT ready to submit. I had a 750 at that point. So really, I wanted someone to kind of help me get my stories together, the short-term, long-term goal, what is the most kind of realistic, and what is my best kind of differentiator. So we had a good chat, and I immediately decided, Scott is the consultant I wanted to go with. I think part of the decision-making process was because we had a face-to-face chat, and also just knowing that from beginning to end, Scott will be there for me, one and only. So I like that consistency. So we started working on all the components, decided on the schools I wanted to apply to, but everything changed kind of end of March or beginning of April. Because of COVID, there was a lot of uncertainty around the deferral policies and how many people would end up, enroll in the program. So that was, thanks to Scott's, kind of encouragement, and also advised me to take the chance to apply during round 3, which still, looking back, it was there were certain risks, right? I mean, I felt like I was super well prepared. I had 7 months to submit my application, but all of a sudden I'm a round 3 applicant, having just 2 weeks before the deadline. So so I was very grateful that Scott was there for me, and we did basically day and night brainstorm on the essays, the stories. So basically submitted Yale, MIT, and Wharton in probably 12, 13 days, including the weekend. So that's, from my personal experience, whatever you need, Scott will be there for you. So that's, why, still until today, I'm still here. Just trying to tell you guys, it's great working with Scott. So I started last August. Finished my first semester. I came to kind of plan to switch career. I was always in technology, wanted to switch to management consulting, but actually decided to, after this first semester, take leave of absence, which, Wharton has been really supportive. You just have to, I think, graduate within 5 years. So that gives, the students a few years to try, whatever you may be interested in. So I started my own tech consulting firm. So far, so good. And I'm here to help answer any questions. Yeah.
Great. Well, Ife, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. And you were a ton of fun to work with. Even our interviewers all gave sort of good feedback on their experiences with you too. So thanks for being here. Okay. So what happens after? And you can stay or drop off. Either way, it's fine. Okay. So after a good interview, sometimes an application goes to another evaluator. So as mentioned, right? The reader might be blind, like the interviewer that might be blind, where they don't see the resume. So they might see the notes, they might not see the notes. And then maybe it goes to an admissions director, or it goes to the committee, and there's kind of a final review process. This will vary a little bit based on the school. So I don't know, is there sometimes? Yeah, so sometimes the ADCOM director will pass on the admits, or maybe denies, get another evaluation. Nicole, I don't know if you have anything else to add here. You mentioned that there's at least 3 views for someone if they don't get in. So after the
Yep.
interview, what kind of happens then?
That's when we go to committee. We went. So we'd sit in in the olden days, we'd sit in a physical room as a committee and review applicants. And that's why I said it's important to, get to know admissions committee members if you can, or at least make a good impression when you do, is because, after the interview, that's when people typically sit down and look at the application and make that final decision, at least in the case of Columbia.
Yeah, and then sometimes they're released on a rolling basis, or maybe by a certain deadline. I wouldn't expect feedback from most schools, but this does depend. Just a quick call out for people that get nervous about things. If you apply someplace and you haven't heard, don't worry so much. Every school is different, and there's certain schools that are just slower to make decisions, and they've always been slower. They always will be slower. And other schools are very clear where they say, everybody will hear on October 31st, and at Personal MBA Coach, we have it in the calendar, 10 a.m., the Wharton results come out, my calendar's clear, I know I'm going to get a bunch of emails from people, I'm excited, what do I do? Connecting them to interviewers. It's just different. So, if a school isn't very specific about what that is, then don't worry so much. And this will vary quite a bit. So in Waitlist, right? So Waitlist happened. I'll let you weigh in on Waitlist too, Nicole, once I'm done. But, sometimes you'll have a conversation with an admissions director if you're on a waitlist, and you kind of have to have a conversation. Other times there is no conversation. The waitlist policy is very important to navigate intelligently. Now, what does intelligently mean? This would vary based on the school. Sometimes schools really just don't want to hear from you. And if you send emails and updates and things, it actually doesn't help you. And other times, if you don't communicate with the school, like I'll let Nicole talk about Columbia, I'll talk about MIT. MIT is also kind of more of a high-touch school. If you get on MIT's waitlist and you're waitlisted for Sloan, and you're like, okay, cool, let me just see what happens, the odds of you getting off the waitlist are extremely low. You haven't engaged, you haven't shown interest, you haven't followed up. So, this does vary a little bit by school. Anything else to add on waitlist policies?
Hopefully the school is going to be somewhat transparent with you about what they expect from you. So they might say, don't reach out to us, we'll reach out to you. They might say you have a waitlist manager and you should reach out to them. My advice would be, if there is some kind of contact, or again, if you know a member of the team, sending them an email, reiterating your interest, if it's your top school, saying so. And you don't have to put a question in there. You don't need to give the ADCOM member more work. Just, saying hi, checking in. That never hurts. But if they say, we'll reach out to you, don't reach out to us, that might be a cue to attend some virtual events, or still stay connected or engaged, but without being the person that is bothering people or trying to be over interested.
Yeah, and that's a good point. One thing that we do here at Personal MBA Coach is coach people to do the right things, and everyone's on a different end of the spectrum. But we had some folks that, and some of my favorite clients have been more overusers, let's say. And so I'd have to say things like, send me every email before you send it to an admissions director, to make sure that you're not sending too many emails and that you're sending the right things in emails. So just be cognizant. These are important things to kind of think about. So I mentioned a little bit about the slide before, and this is not a complete list. This is not definite. This might be wrong. This is just Scott's thoughts for what I hear from talking with folks in admissions. Schools that are placing value on demonstrated interest. So certainly Columbia up here, MIT, Duke, and there are others here. Schools that don't place value, meaning if you go to 12 events for Stanford and you're competing with your friend that goes to 0 events, your 12 events will do absolutely nothing for you to get you accepted based on demonstrated interest. Doesn't mean you won't learn a lot about the program, but it's just not part of the evaluation process to see how engaged you are. And again, that's very different from what Nicole just said. So this varies by school. This is not a complete list, and everyone might have a different perspective, but from what we see, these are some things to start to think about. So it's important as you're going through to work with a trusted advisor, whether that's a consultant or if there's someone else in your kind of world that can really guide you through this and help you to make the right decision. So we had some really great conversations so far. We're not going to get through a lot of these slides, so I'm going to jump through. I'm going to skip the resume today. We'll go over the resume in another session. I will talk a little bit about recommenders just very briefly, and then we'll have other videos with GMAT Club on YouTube, and we also have our own YouTube channel. And you can visit personalmbacoach.com. We have a lot of downloadable guides, so they're all free. A lot of just different pieces of advice and tips. We have videos. We have client success videos on our website. You can take a look at, see if you can connect with everyone. And we're launching a new website soon, so look for that. But recommenders, right? Pick someone who will write an amazing letter. If you only walk away with one bullet here, you can delete everything else. Ask somebody who will write a great letter. That's really what's most important. The title doesn't matter. Ideally they've worked with you for a while. Ask them early. But with recommenders, and I'm sure Nicole and I could talk for an hour about recommenders. It's a really an important topic. But given the sort of interest in time, you want to think about asking somebody who knows you and who's honest, right? So in this, I used to have a bullet here about better than God letter. Yeah, so here, right? Specificity, recency, honesty, and detail. This is back when I used to memorize presentation. I first started giving these 14 years ago. So the thing to call out here is really the honesty, right? You want the letter that is true. So if you see a letter that's like, Scott was the best consultant that Deloitte has ever seen and everything was amazing. I was not the best performer, I'll be honest there. And if I asked somebody to write that in a letter or they did it, it probably wouldn't help. So really be honest and be specific. Nicole, I'll let you add a couple more things here. I'm sure you could add a ton more, but what other things have I not captured so far?
I mean, I would agree that, and I don't know if you said this yet, or I'm just remembering from looking at the deck, it doesn't need to be a CEO. It should be someone that knows you well. And also that, I think having a conversation with someone, I know it's difficult to go to a boss and say, I'd love for you to highlight these things about me and take time out and write this letter. But if you do have that relationship, talking with that person because you do want it to be as specific as possible. The other piece of advice, if you're saying in your essay you want to do this thing and you see yourself achieving this goal because you do consulting now, but you actually did maybe like to use the consulting to venture capital example. Maybe you did consulting, but you did like in, one of the big firms has like, you can take 6 months off and work somewhere else kind of under their umbrella. And you did that in the VC world. You'll want your letter of recommendation to mention that like 6-month experience to confirm kind of the story that you're telling, or, if there are these things that you're highlighting, if the recommender can highlight those things and they're kind of saying the same achievements that you are, it really helps us to kind of have this richer understanding of your story.
Super helpful. Thank you. That's amazing advice. And I feel like I was going to say something else about recommendation letters? Oh, yes. One other thing. So don't write any part of your rec letter at all. If you're thinking about doing that, and I know in certain parts of the world that happens, don't do it. You'll likely get caught. There's a lot of, it's not worth it. So just don't do it at all. There's software programs that schools run. It's, and I'm putting this out there because it's, people get caught off guard without trying to, cheat the system. And sometimes it's the recommender's fault. Pick somebody who will write the letter. Now, coaching them is not writing the letter. And, make sure that they're going to write their own letter. That's important. It's just not worth it otherwise. If someone's not willing to, then they're not the right recommender. And we deal with that often. So all the time people come to me, so-and-so, they, and sometimes we even see, I'm like, this kind of looks like your essays. Oh yeah, their boss was too busy, and so they had me write it. So we help them to figure out another solution, but the solution should never be you're writing the letter yourself. It's too risky. So we already did the case study, so we'll kind of skip that. So I'm going to go, let's see how much time we have. So let's talk about, well, Nicole, I'll have you talk about the Columbia essays very briefly, maybe for like a couple minutes. Then I'll go over some details about us, and then we'll go to questions. So we'll kind of shorten the deck a little bit. I'll kind of kick this off, right? So this is the essay number one. Formatting was a bit off. Now, this is from last year. So the essays have not been released for this year yet. We're not expecting large changes, but, technically this was from last year. What are your goals over 3 to 5 years? And, what in your imagination would be your long-term, dream job? So what we always tell folks is to really be specific here. Don't write too much about the past. Be very detailed about what you want to do, and maybe talk about Columbia, kind of at the end. Nicole, I'll let you kind of jump in here to give some other words of advice for this essay.
So the advice that I would give when people ask about this first essay is that, the question really is, what job are you hoping to obtain post MBA? So like, what's that first role out of the MBA? You can talk a little bit about midterm, but then also your long-term dream job. So, Columbia liked big dreamers. And I would also tell people you don't have to explain or spend time telling the committee how you're going to get from your short-term to your long-term goal, because people rarely know. But I think a great example of, a candidate from years and years ago whose goal was to return to his consulting firm because he was sponsored. Great. That makes a lot of sense. Easy. And then he was really into cars. So he wanted to be the chief technology officer at Ferrari. He was from Italy. So also it made sense, but it's a big dream. And I think that really speaks to kind of innovation and drive. And so that short-term goal is going to be the most important aspect, because we're going back to how pragmatic is the goal. And this is where, if I know there are a couple of questions about making a pivot, in my experience, the classes, kind of guessing half and half. Half people want to, quicken their trajectory in their industry, and half want to pivot out of function or industry. So both are very welcome. This is where, if you are making that pivot, you're telling why you're making that pivot, and then starting to talk about how you see yourself making that pivot. And that's where that Columbia aspect could really come into the application. If there are, if you're trying to pivot into private equity or venture capital, there are incredible number of resources at Columbia, and I'd be surprised not to see them if, I were reading an application. So that's what the question is asking. What job do you want to get out of the MBA, at least in my opinion, and what's your dream goal? And I would agree, you don't have to spend too much on the past, unless the past really does tell the story of how you're getting to this goal too. Then it's okay.
Great. And
but I think,
in case folks don't know what their dream job is, it's okay to just, and this is not to contradict, but from our experiences, some people don't have a dream job, and so we might just write about a long-term goal that's director of marketing for XYZ, and that could also work out fine. So don't feel like if you don't know about this Ferrari CEO path, that's okay. As long as, again, as Nicole said, the goals are very specific and for everywhere. It's not just for Columbia, but kind of all over. Right after school is going to be most important. Nobody really knows what they want to do in the long term anyway, and what you want to do is not likely what you end up doing.
Yep, I would agree.
So,
this question, this question really is, like we talked about on an earlier slide, there are schools that look at engagement and care about engagement, and schools that don't as much. And Columbia certainly was one of those schools that were mentioned that, care about engagement. But this is kind of where you would get to show off your engagement. You're not just attending events or talking to people. You want to take that learning and you want to put it into practice here in that essay. And so I would advise people to kind of paint a picture of how they see themselves achieving their goals and thriving socially and academically at Columbia. So, you know, again, if you're making a switch from consulting to private equity or venture, that's like a very big jump. That's a tough one. But like, this is where, especially, let's go back to those people that want to make that 180-degree pivot in some way, shape, or form. This is where you're going to start pulling out different courses, professors, centers, programs, things about a school that is going to help you. When you show us how you're leveraging the school to achieve that goal, then we're not worried that you're going to come in and you know, flounder trying to figure out how you're going to get there. You've already shown us that you're going to hit the ground running. And so I think that that is where this is really important. If someone wrote an essay and said, I really want to go to a school, or like, I like Columbia because they have like cohorts or clusters, and they have global faculty, and they have a big city campus. It's like, well, so do a lot of other top schools. And so I think really being thoughtful, and this advice could go for kind of any question like this on an application.
Yeah. Fantastic advice.
Sorry, one thing I'll say, because I saw cultural fit. Also, don't be afraid to say you want to be the president of the Microbrew Society or the volleyball club, or you just want to go to a top school in that city. Maybe you want to go to a top school in New York City because your family's there and you want to come back. You know, things like that, I think, are also okay to say. Again, these are humans reading your application, and we want to admit humans into the program.
Yeah, and especially at some schools that, you know, are in different markets. So let's say if you're looking to apply to London Business School, and you know, we do a lot of work there, we can get you like a priority kind of application review there, actually, and you want to show them why you want to go to London. Will they believe that you'll actually go, or are you applying to LBS and then, you know, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Columbia, Booth? So we're going to skip over this. Yeah, so our clients get into all the top schools, and again, we'll probably be over 7 million this year. We're still tallying some sort of round two numbers, but anywhere you're looking to apply to, you know, we have folks that are going. A little bit about what we do, and then we'll finish up with, you know, kind of questions at the end. So, you know, family run kind of boutique since 2008. We do work 7 days a week. All clients will receive, you know, one-on-one support from an industry veteran. If you want to work, you know, it's not too late to sign up. You can work, you know, directly with myself, you know, the founder. You know, we have some great admissions insight from, you know, Nicole and MJ, whether that's working directly or, you know, as an advisor kind of throughout the process, questions that come up, things like that. And we also have a lot of knowledge base and a project management tool. So a lot of downloadables, a lot of guides, sort of insights that we create. So guides for every school to tell you exactly what you should be doing or not doing, you know, for that particular program. And then a kind of small client network. So former clients at all the top schools, we often have meetup events and kind of social events and things like that. Obviously, not recently, but you know, in other more kind of normal times, let's say. So what can we do? So we help you throughout the whole process. If you're thinking, here's me with a bad haircut, not that it's better today, but anyway, if you're thinking I'm applying in the future, I'm not ready yet, cool presentation, but you know, come back to me later. We have early MBA planning, right? And so that's from, you know, kind of 3 months to, you know, 3 years before an application. And you can work directly with somebody, you know, like Nicole or MJ, who's evaluated thousands and thousands of applications and can tell you what are all the things you should be doing. Do you need to do more extracurricular leadership? Do you need to do, you know, more leadership at work? Are there classes you need to take? Let's start an organization around, you know, weightlifting and physical fitness to try to get you from here to there. So that's a lighter touch, you know, package that kind of stretches across a longer, you know, period of time. So we can help you to improve. We also have some of the best tutors in the industry, and we have whole webinars on tutoring, I think on our YouTube channel. So GMAT, GRE, executive assessment tutors, everybody says 99 percentile. You know, our tutors have even higher. 99 percentile starts at 750. And we have some clients that have 750 that then need tutoring. So, you know, you have to have at least 780. I think I have a couple tutors with the 770 on our team. And in-house software that we're using to guide through the tutoring sessions with modules and sample questions, full-length exam, thousands of answers. So it works really well. And if you're taking a class, that's great. A lot of people take some of the best classes out there in the industry, and then they're coming to us for tutoring for that next level of support. And then, you know, former M7 interviewers as well. to guide you through the interview process. So we do tutoring, brainstorming, story development, essay, content development, editing, school selection. We'll go through more of this process. If you are interested in, working with us, send a note, personalmbacoach.com, and we're happy to, discuss any further. We'll go to questions, and these are a couple downloadables. So M7 essay analysis. You can get this from our webpage, personalmbacoach.com, or you can click here directly if you can click on this. And then also like a Beyond the M7 analysis book. Maybe some of you are thinking, say, I'm not applying to M7, I don't have those stats, and you still want some help. So I'll leave it on let's see, what should I leave it on? I guess I'll leave it on here for now. And then we'll go to questions for the last few minutes. So okay, so question from Akshay. I have 10 years of work experience and I'm 31 years old. Am I an outlier among other applicants? Nicole, maybe I'll let you tackle that one.
Yeah, this is a good question. You want to understand what you want out of a program. So if you are looking for a role that is more senior than the typical post-MBA graduate, you might want to consider an executive MBA program. But if you're looking to kind of make a big pivot and you're comfortable with going into a post-MBA role, even though you feel like your peers might be a little bit younger, I would say, just make sure that you're making that very clear in your application. But if you're hoping that all of your peers that are surrounding you in the classroom are about the same age and that the career support that you're going to get is that of someone maybe more of a director level or more of a leadership level, then I would consider executive MBA programs. Most of the top schools, they're the same MBA, it's the same program, it's just like a different schedule, but the people that you're surrounded with might be more of the caliber. So it really depends on your goals. And I think that's why, Scott is a really great resource because it kind of really helps you think into a decision that is a little bit more complicated than just what I want to do in an MBA, but like which program is going to best suit me.
Yeah, and we're developing for a new website a lot of content knowledge just around executive MBAs. So they're all different. Columbia has the youngest program out there. They're an average of 9 years of experience. MIT is an average of 17 years of experience. Mm-hmm. So if you've 10 years and you're looking to apply to MIT, you qualify for sure. But you might be on the lower side. So many people are advising me to think about MBA again as I'm on the higher side of my application. We'll go through. Okay. Yeah. So we talked about that. And then program structures. I mean, there's 1 year, Nicole's mentioning a little bit, there's 1 year programs, there's 2 year program. Columbia is great. I'm not saying this because Nicole's here, but so Columbia has January term, right? January term. Could you squeak in if you're a little older? I think so. So as you start to think about this, think about the program structure and what they're really looking for. So what if I have work experience in a particular industry? I'm looking to switch post MBA. Will that be a negative point? I would say no. Most people are looking to switch, and as Nicole mentioned, you just have to explain that switch and why that makes sense for you. I think you asked that question before we talked about that.
Yeah.
How does CFA help? So I'll let Nicole weigh in on this as well, but I'll start. So how does CFA help a candidate to get an advantage in the application process? My opinion here is that CFA is helpful. It's a tough exam. It demonstrates abilities, but it's a lot of work, and I feel like you only get partial credit for that. But Nicole, is that accurate? Not accurate? Tell me what you think.
Yeah, it's tough because it's somewhat ubiquitous in terms of applicants. It's not so unique that you're going to stand out. I think if you're a fantastic candidate and we were a little bit nervous about your academics, but we really saw you at the school or things like that, and we were worried about whether you could handle studying while also being in orientation and all of the temptations of the MBA outside of academics, that completing the CFA would really help to understand that you can study while working full time and do well. It's not an easy exam. But again, it's a little bit ubiquitous and it's going, yeah, it's not something, it's something you might call attention to if you aren't, demonstrating that same high score on the GMAT or GRE that you needed to, and you kind of wanted to explain your other ways of being strong academically.
Great. So with English, Duolingo test and EA online test, instead of traditional IELTS and GMAT, does this combination weaken my application, applying the top 25 to 50 programs? I actually don't know. Nicole, do you know about that? I mean, I think that if school accepts an exam, they accept it, but maybe you can give some more context here.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. The EA, I guess we're talking about the EA as in the executive assessment.
I think so. Yeah. So there's
Okay.
about the English Duolingo test.
Yeah.
Versus NEA versus traditional IELTS and GMAT.
Yeah. I'll give a perspective in terms of EA. We didn't require IELTS, TOEFL, or PTE. So it's not something that we looked at in the application process. But I would agree, if a school says that they are accepting an executive assessment and you are doing well on an executive assessment, and by doing well, you probably have to ask an ADCOM member about that because there isn't a lot of data online. I would typically say doing well is 155 or above, but the more data schools get, the better they know what a good score is for the pool. But I can't really speak to the language tests.
Yeah, and also the EA score, that depends on the program even within the school. So so I think you were talking about full time.
Yes.
Right.
Full-time, I would say 155 or above. But again, we had so little data on that you couldn't say for certain. And there's no conversion tool either. For the executive MBA, it's going to be a little different because there's such emphasis on work experience.
Right. Yeah. And if you need some help with the EA, we have the best EA tutor in the industry. We were the first firm to offer private EA tutoring, I believe. And yeah, it's going to vary. Like if you want to look at Wharton, their executive MBA, you should be getting above 160. However, it's not even the total score. So, some schools are looking at the quant, and we've seen people not get in with high scores because the quant is low. And I mean, we had somebody I almost shouldn't say this because then I'll get all people with, but I had someone in the high 140s get into Wharton for the executive assessment, getting to Wharton executive MBA. That doesn't mean a 148 can get in, but it happened with us. But his quant score is very high. So, it really varies. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. If a school's taken the English Duolingo test, then that's what they're. So can a good essay make up for quantitative shortfalls such as GPA or a GMAT? I feel like these are different buckets, right?
Yeah, this goes back to I can't imagine a school admitting someone that they think will fail in the classroom. It's just not fair to the school, the peers, or the person who has to pay for that first semester, even if they don't make it to the second semester. And so it depends what that shortfall looks like.
Yeah. And I know that's a tough answer to hear, but we're pretty brutal. And if you want the direct honesty, we don't take everybody. We turn away a lot of clients. You have to be competitive.
Yeah. But that question,
and also for your own. Sorry, go ahead.
That question opens up, like several other roads to kind of making up for a shortfall. I don't know that I think there are ways to make up for that. I don't know that an essay is what it is.
Great clarification. Yep.
Yeah.
So we have two more questions here, which takes us right on time. I plan on retaking the GMAT once more. I think it's worth doing a third time if my first score was a 710. So yeah, that's hard to answer those types of profile questions because what school are we talking about? I mean, we have people in the 600s going to M7 schools. We have people 750 getting rejected from M7 schools. So it's tough to say, but I would say if you think you can improve it, retake the test. How many times you take it doesn't matter so much. I mean, if you take it 8, okay, it's a little bit better to take it 4 maybe, but yeah, certainly, it's worth kind of retaking it. And here's a question. So you reposted. Sorry. So what does Harvard ask for? So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by what does Harvard ask for, but they have an open question usually. That's just kind of tell us a little bit more about whatever you'd like us to know. They want to have leadership. They want to have success, kind of key accomplishments. That's a little bit of a longer question to answer here, but feel free to ping me privately if you had a more specific a question about that. And then there's one other question. I know the answer, but I'll let you answer this, Nicole. Communication on social media. Communication with ADCOM on social media. I'll let you answer that.
I'm interested to hear your answer. I would say it's not best practice. If people try to add me on other social media, no, I would say don't interact with an ADCOM member. On LinkedIn, if I'd met you, sometimes I'd add. The only time that I want to connect with someone on LinkedIn is if they have matriculated at Columbia and I have, so many close friends now from the process. I would not encourage someone to use LinkedIn to reach out to set up a call or send a thank you. You can't keep track of all of that. That is my personal opinion. What would you say, Scott?
No, and that was very polite and professional. I would say absolutely not. Don't even think about adding anybody on LinkedIn. Which is a less polite answer. Yeah. That's the professional network. You're not working with an admissions director. Mm-hmm. They're not in your professional network right now. So that's just not the appropriate means for connecting. It's a great question, though.
Yeah, that is a good question.
But okay, so I think we have another question here, and then once we're done, feel free to end it whenever, Vijay, whenever you need to end it. So could you be so kind to let me know if I could offset a low undergrad score, 3.4, with a stellar work performance, Big Four, multiple awards. So I would say that, similar to what what Nicole mentioned, and visit the link personalmbacoach.com. Get a consultation. We'd love to chat with you and kind of explore more about what we do and why our process is kind of pretty unique in the system and why we have some of the highest success rates. Work experience is different from academic performance, right? So as Nicole mentioned, work does not make up for academic performance, but a 3.4 is a fine GPA. Is it the best? No, but we get 3.4s into every school. So that does not preclude you. Yes, and make sure to like this button if you found this session helpful. Make sure that mounted. 3.4 does not preclude you from any school in the world. We would need to look at everything else, but that certainly could be fine. So we have time for a couple more questions, or should we wrap up? Okay, so we'll do a couple more questions then. So GMAT 700, Indian Navy officer, served various leadership. Various leadership positions. 30 years old, 8 years of experience, leadership role or entrepreneurship. So schools. I think for what you want to do, if you want to go 700 GMAT Indian, I would look at what are kind of averages, right? And so if you're, let's say, from India and you have a score, maybe you want to do a little bit above average to compete. So I don't know that I'd be shooting for tons of schools with a 730 average if your GMAT is 700. Now that doesn't mean nobody will get in with that score, but trying to be a little bit conservative here. I would say looking at schools in range of maybe 10 or 12 to kind of 25-ish ranked. I won't go into all of the details given the timing, but that's what I would say based on what I'm hearing so far. And so do you think that? So I'll answer this. I'm a very blunt person. Do I think the costs for U.S. admission exams are prohibitive for people from other geographies? So just some facts here. About half of our clients are outside of the U.S. The largest majority are from India. We have clients that are taking loans. We have clients that are on payment plans. The way that we value our impact is by getting someone into a school that's better than what they otherwise would have gotten into, and scholarships. So on average, our clients all make money working with us, and a lot of money. Now, that doesn't mean every single person will get more scholarship dollars with us than applying on their own, but we have a lot of data points. So I had a guy who was from Zimbabwe, but applying from Bermuda. He applied 1 year, did not get any scholarships, applied the next year with us, got 50,000, which is not even super high. Our average scholarship award was, a lot higher than that, more than twice that. But got an extra, so he paid us about 13,000. Got 50,000 in scholarship. So, for that person, I think it was worth it because he was able to take, a lower loan. It's a very personal decision. So there's no should or shouldn't in this process. I think you should do the diligence, figure out, what's right for you, and have some conversations and kind of figure out the best plan for you. So I think that was most of the questions here. So if we missed anything, let us know. But thank you everyone for joining. Feel free to reach out, www.personalmbacoach.com. Scott at personalmbacoach.com. We actually haven't, Nicole's brand new. We haven't set up an email address for Nicole yet. So that will be Nicole soon at Personal, but this hasn't been set up yet. But thank you, Nicole, so much. Really appreciate the time here. I know Ife's not here, but thank you, Ife. Thank you, Abhijit, and the whole GMAT Club team. And look forward to chatting with everybody on the next webinar. Best of luck, and try to stay as safe as you can. If you have the opportunity to, get a vaccine.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me, Scott. This is really fun.